All right, everybody. Welcome. And yeah, this is kind of take two of our attempt at a Happy Chaos guide. Uh, First one I did, I was so rambly at like, I don't know, 30 minutes. I wasn't even halfway done the guide, so I kind of cut it. So hopefully this one is going to be a little bit more concise. One thing that I really want to highlight moreover than anything else is just forming a solid game plan with Happy Chaos and how to actually transfer that practically into a match. So I'm not really going to be going over like, oh, this is his 5A, this is his, 2P, this is his 5K, because I'm pretty sure every other Happy Chaos guide on the planet kind of uses that format. So I'm going to assume that you at least know how his moves work, what they do, and what their kind of general properties are. This one's a low, it's 10 frames, or 11 frames actually, but like, yeah, I kind of want to move past that into a bit more practical use of his abilities, because that's one thing I think that in playing fighting games for a while, I think I've gotten reasonably good at is just looking at a character's tools, finding out like, what do they want to do to win, and trying to make sure that happens as often as we can. So the one thing that I do want to highlight before we begin, because this is important for a lot of techniques, is a lot of people, know Happy Chaos has a gun. When he doesn't have you cursed, the gun is a little bit more inaccurate. But just to remind people that when the opponent is in block or hit stun, the gun cannot miss. So, even if they're not cursed, this is never going to miss because they're in block stun. Same when you've got your opponents in a combo. Once your opponent is blocking or being hit, your gun is never going to miss. It's always going to hit the opponent. This is important for a couple of techniques that we're going to talk about. So just heads up that curse only applies to neutral. It only affects your opponents when they're in a neutral state by making your gun more accurate. If you notice here, your gun kind of blocks on really quick, whereas this one takes a little while. And same with steady aim. When you go in a steady aim, sometimes you'll hit the opponent, sometimes you won't when they're not cursed. But when you have them cursed, you'll lock on immediately. So yeah, let's just get right into it. One thing I'm really going to focus on is just saying everything one time, taking advantage of the video format. The teacher in me always wants to kind of come around to the same point, but it's not really necessary for what we're doing right now. So that's something for me to work on with these guides, I guess. So one thing, and I got my cheat sheet here, that I want to talk about is when you're playing a character, at least when I'm playing a character, that has a lot of tools at different ranges. Like I use kind of the same idea like Guile in Street Fighter when I used to play them, is you have almost like this hierarchy of options that's based upon your distance relative to the opponent. As you get farther away from your opponent, some moves get better to use, some moves get worse. And as you get closer to the opponent, the inverse is also true. So that is a framework that I use to try to just identify what my good tools were at specific ranges. So essentially the layout of this guide is going to be, what to do when you are, life is good. With Happy Chaos, we got him full screen. What to do when we're at the mid-range, and what to do when we're a little bit closer to the opponents, and the differences between those three ranges. So let's get started. So when you're full screen, and this is something that's going to happen reasonably frequently because when you hit your opponent with a combo, or even if it breaks the wall, if it doesn't break the wall, your opponent is going to be put at a full screen range or similar to this range. So your opponent is not going to like to play at this range most of the time because Happy Chaos is probably better than they are at at fighting at this range, but it is still one that we want to go over. So what are our options at this range? Well, we can throw Curse to make our steady aim shots more accurate. If the opponent has a move like Beyblade or Night Raid Vortex or what's another one? Stun Dipper's not really going to hit at this range, but anything that like moves the opponent forward a lot for low commitment. we want to kind of just put up the scapegoat to make sure that they're not able to use this move against that move against us. So this is a little bit matchup dependent, but it's yeah, still useful to know. One thing that I do want to go over into a bit more detail though is going into your steady aim, which is done by doing quarter circle back. Oh my goodness, announcer. Quarter circle back, slash, and then you enter your steady aim stance. Now, when I was initially just starting out with Happy Chaos, I wouldn't go into steady aim unless they were already cursed because I'm like, oh my god, what if my shot misses? Then I'm dead. But honestly, if you're full screen, you have time to let the reticle actually lock on to the opponent before your opponent really has the chance to close the gap. Like, you will lock on before they move to you, because common misconception, your opponent moving doesn't actually affect the aim of the gun. So if your opponent's just moving around, your gun is going to track them the same way, regardless of, like, you know, it's not any worse than if they were standing still. So all you need is a couple of frames, and then you'll immediately lock onto them. This is kind of the first thing that I really want to highlight if you're going to practice anything in training mode, as far as execution requirements go. One thing that I'm going to go over is his guard break shot loops right now. And this is effectively going into steady aim, pressing and releasing H, and then pressing 2-2-P to reload. And if you do that loop, and you loop it as quickly as you can, or almost as quickly as you can, what you're going to notice is that you're going to be abusing that lock-on thing that we talked about before, where your opponent is still in block stun when you go into your next steady shot. So, you take the shot, reload, go into your next steady shot, and if you're quick enough, it will already be locked on, which will give your opponent a very small amount of time to do anything before the next shot comes out. So when you're quick, it'll look like this. That is not the right recording, so uno momento. Okay, it will look like this. Now the tricky thing with this is you do want to wait a hair before you actually, between when you go into steady aim and when you take your shot, because if you don't, it'll look like this, and your opponents will just block it normally. But you want to wait that extra couple of frames so that your opponent is put in the Wonelli block stun, as us in the scene call it, where they kind of flail backwards. And that means your shots are way more plus, your opponent has far less time to react, and it does more chip damage, more damage on hits. So you really want to grind out this execution requirement. So yes, I'll replay it for you one more time. It should look like this if you're doing it properly. And it's a really big part of his game plan, especially full screen. One thing I do want to keep in mind, though, is your opponent is likely, I have infinite concentration on right now just for sake of the demo, but your opponent is likely aware, if they are good, that Happy Chaos normally only gets about 3 shots off before he runs out of focus. And he can't shoot a 4th one, or he is going to go into the unfocused state where meter turns red and you're unable to use any gun moves until it comes back. So what I think is important to do as well is to treat the shots almost like full screen Rekkas, where sometimes, yes, you do shoot off 3 shots in a row, and that's totally fine, you're keeping your opponent honest, but it is very easy for you to weave in different things as well into the block strings, so you're keeping your offense varied, keeping your zoning varied. So you can shoot off 3 shots, but you can also, on the second shot, concentrate again. That gives you a little bit more focus, and then you can resume your zoning. Or you can shoot your second shot, throw curse, and then concentrate as well. And your opponents, because they're so scared of getting shot with that 3rd shot, they probably are not going to react in time for you to, for them to meaningfully punish you before you resume shooting. So that's, just another thing to keep in mind. Keep your zoning varied. And I think that's something that a lot of Happy Chaos players don't do, is they kind of just tunnel vision on doing the same 3-hit string over and over and over and over again, and the opponent just kind of waits it out. Oh yes, just basic combo for this as well. This is kind of, you know, what the stakes are for your opponent if they get hit. You know, they take about like 50% even with 3 shots, so they definitely are not are very incentivized to not get hit by this because the damage is so high. And if you're even closer range, you can do something like this. One thing I do want to note though is I'm kind of just supering for show, but like you don't really want to super mid-screen unless, you know, it's going to break the wall. What you want to do instead is, you know, shot, reload, throw curse, and then concentrate. And then you're 1 bullet down, but your opponent is also cursed. 1 bullet is not that hard to recuperate in the grand scheme of things. You know, if you shoot, you can always just reload an extra bullet, kind of varying that zoning like we talked about. And you have more focus to resume your next wave of shots. So yes, good thing to keep in mind. Okay. Yeah, curse, scapegoat, get resources. Yeah, of course. And you know, if you're full screen, you are a resource-based character. So if you are low on focus, it is 40-ish frames of total, like in total. So you can do that. You can just reload your bullets because these are things that you don't want to run out of, especially bullets. Like if you run out of bullets, you're kind of sunk. You really like need bullets to get bullets, and if you run out, it's usually a really bad time for Happy Chaos. You have to pretty much go for like a lot of YOLO sweeps and try to hope they run into it, because otherwise you're not going to get any bullets back. Let's see. At the mid-range, yes. So, you know, this is not something you can do infinitely, right? Because your opponent is going to eventually creep in if they're blocking it correctly, and you're just going to run out of resources. You can't, excuse me, gonna take a drink. You can't do it forever, so your opponent is eventually going to close in on you. And when you do, maybe when you get to about round start distance. Well, Happy Chaos actually has very strong buttons to fight at these ranges as well. And he can actually abuse, again, that idea that if your opponent is already in block stun, the gun auto tracks to do some really, really strong block strings. And this is going to be the second thing that I really highlight as being important to grind out the execution for, which is, and I'm going to do it slow initially and then play the dummy, which is doing it a bit faster. But you want to do a button into press and release H, and then go into steady aim and fire off a clean hit. And if you do it quick enough, I'm going to set the dummy to all guard. What will happen is your button will put them in block stun, which means your H button, your H gun, will auto target. And then the H gun will put them in block stun for your clean hit. So it's not going to be a tight block string, but between the sweep, or your button, doesn't have to be sweep, it can be 6S, it can be 2S, or 5S, or it can be sweep. You are going to have, if you do it absolutely perfectly, about a 3-frame gap between your shot and your steady shot. And this is really good because that means it'll trade with even Souls 5k if you're doing it fast enough. And on trade, it is massively good for you because you're getting hit with like a 3-frame button with a small amount of head stun. They're getting hit with a clean hit shot, which means they're going to jettison up into the air for like a giant punish, even if they're like, if you trade. But even if, you know, getting it 3 frames is pretty difficult to do, even if you can get it to like 4 or 5 frame gap, it's still very viable because not every character has a 3-framer, and only like one, I think, has a 4-framer. I think it's like Geo has a 4-framer, and then Chip and so we'll have a 3-framer. So even if you get it to like 5 frames, it's still fine. But yes, when you do it properly, it will look something like this. And this is really good because you know, and I'll show what it looks like on trade, because this is a 5-frame gap. You know, that traded. I hit him with a 5p. He hit me with a clean slot, or a close clean hit. So he has a giant opportunity to combo me from that position. And yeah, just quickly going through the different normals you want to get into the habit of doing this off of. His 6S is the longest range button that he has. It can be low profiled very easily. Like if you 2K, you can definitely preempt it, but it catches people at like IAD height as well, and it just reaches really far. Like this is just a big button. 5S is a little bit, it doesn't extend his hurt box as much, so you can use this as well. 2S is a low. And is this one is 11 frames, this one is 10 frames, I believe. So if 2S is also good to do this string off of, like this. That didn't clean hit, that one did. And lastly, this is also 10 frames and is a low. So depending on what range your opponent's at, like if they're here, for example, you don't really want to go in a clean hit, or sorry, in the steady shot, because if they dash up on you, you're going to die. But what you can do instead is do 6S and do that technique we talked about and establish a huge amount of frame advantage. And this is what we're going to go over next. So I'm just going to go to slot 2. So for example, what we can do off of this button, that looked like it shouldn't be a type block string, right? I'm mashing my 5-framer there. And I'm getting punished. So it looks like it shouldn't work, but it does. Like you have a massive amount of frame advantage. So what you can do once you've set up this technique and you've gotten your opponent in the Wonelli block stun, you can do a couple of different things. You can just do like a dash up 2K or a 6K for a low to try to catch your opponent up backing or jumping out. You can walk up and throw them as well, like I demonstrated. You can shimmy them by walking back, backdashing, and then doing the same technique. So, you know, go up for a throw. And this is also a combo starter, by the way. I'll demonstrate what that looks like in a second, but that's another thing you can do, is just dash up, dash back 2D. And if they actually try to take the throw, or like tech the throw, then you have a huge counter hit punish. Or you can also use your 5D. It's 20 frames if you do it without holding it. And you can also use that property of your gun to combo off of your 5D, you know, by dashing up 5D and then going for a shot into a small combo. And this is another thing you can do to mix up the opponent. And just to demonstrate, like what a 5D combo would probably look like is, you know, if you're close enough to the opponent, you know, you can do something like that. I could have been a bit faster, but c'est la vie. Okay, so yes, it's also a combo starter, which I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second. It's going to set the dummy to block. And doing the exact same string, you can get something like this. So the notation for that one is, you know, you're doing the same thing. It's like 2D, H shot, steady shot, and then you do dash up, 6K in the steady shot, 6H in the steady shot, or sorry, 6S in the steady shot, and then it will break the wall. So you can replay that if you want to see my notation. And one thing to keep in mind though is off of a 2S, it's really, really difficult to do. So I also opt to go for this combo instead, which I have the dummy set to do right now. So that combo also works off of A2S. It's very consistent. So yeah, it's a good one to know as well. Let's see. Is there any other thing to go over as far as mid-range? Oh yeah. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Whiffing normals with Happy Chaos is normally very bad because let's say you do 2D at a range where it's not going to hit. If you actually still even press 5H, you're going to pull out the gun and suddenly you whiffed a normal and you're unable to block until you put the gun away. So it's something to really keep in mind is that you want to be purposeful with placing your normals because they, if you whiff them, it's a really, really bad idea. Also, at the mid-range, again, pulling out the gun is very risky because if your opponent is preemptive and like presses a button on you, this is counter hit state, so you really, unless they're cursed, I wouldn't touch this unless your opponent is already in block stun. Just as a heads up. Oh yeah, one more thing to note is if you, let's say for example, your opponent is, let's see, where can I put this? If your opponent is dash blocking in after your zoning, so what, I kind of scuffed the end there, but if you're zoning out your opponent and they're gaining ground on you by dash blocking in, what you can do instead of your second shot, if you're noticing they're getting very close, is instead of going for that third shot, what you can do is actually pull up with a normal and start your offense from there. Now, you're probably not going to have a ton of concentration when this happens. So if you have 50 meter, what you can do is you pop your focus super. And what your focus super does is it immediately gives you 100% concentration back, or almost immediately. You have to wait like 3 or 4 frames for it to do so, for the bar to fill back up. And it also gives you you use concentration a lot less for about maybe like 6 seconds or so. So if you're finding that you're pressuring the opponent and you're running low on concentration, but you really want to press your advantage and open the opponent up, that is something that you can use. Is if you're finding that your opponent just like hasn't cracked yet, but you want to keep pressuring them, you can go into concentration super and maintain that pressure and try to get that hit. So let's go to the, oh yeah, one last thing, especially with characters with strong far slashes like Ramlethal and the like, setting up a clone is still fine because it gives you space. So it's still good to do at the mid range. Okay, so Happy Chaos, normally like his close range tools are okay, and usually what they're good at is just, excuse me, I'm gonna take another drink. The reward he gets off of his buttons is still very good. So it's less that, his buttons are amazing and more just like if he hits you with them at a close range, he gets a lot of reward. So, what are our options at close range? Well, we have our 5K, which is 6 frames and actually hits a pretty decent range for 6 frames. And we also have our 2K, which is a little bit longer range and is 7 frames. And if the opponent gets hit by either of these, we can go into this short combo, which I'm going to show you right here. So you can effectively loop that as many times as you want, like 5 or 2K into 6K into shot, and do that until your opponent gets to the corner. As long as you have the concentration and the bullets, mind you. So if you're like way back here, you're probably not going to be able to do it. But this is actually going to combo. So it's actually a really good position to be in because we got to concentrate and get our bullets back, because even on, if you don't hit the opponent with it, Deus Ex Machina still regenerates all your bullets for you. So it's a very simple combo that you can also practice in training mode. I would definitely grind out the execution for this, just getting into the habit of doing that. If you are a little bit farther away from the corner and you don't think that you have the bullets or the concentration to do that, you can also just go into a small, reload, throw curse, and suddenly you're back at the mid-range, but you're also at a position of frame advantage. So most of the time I would feel comfortable going for like a steady shot here. Something like that. I actually thought that was going to break the wall. And as well, you do have Iori JD for the taco kick. So if your back's to the corner, you press an Abare 5K into 6K, let's say, for example, you can actually corner your opponent very easily by doing this route. And suddenly you've turned the tables and you have turned a position of relative, weakness into one where it's probably your game to lose at that point. Yeah, so let's just make sure. Yeah, 5K and 2K can lead to some great reward if they get the hits. One thing to keep in mind though is I see a lot of players online really like to use this even as block strings. I'm not a giant fan because 2K into 6K or 5K into 6K can both be thrown from relatively far distance away. Like you can throw them here. You can, however, do, and it's the same block if you want to do this to change it up. If you do 2 or 5K into 6S, that is actually a 1 frame gap. So your opponent cannot throw and will in fact get absolutely bomboed if they try to throw. But that also loses to a couple of other things like 6P. So I'm not a huge fan of like, I see a bunch of Happy Chaos players do this where they're just like kind of loop this, and if the opponent just like, decides to just down back, it's not really the scariest position to be in. Like you can go for a tick throw, but that's pretty much it. So it's yeah, it's okay, but I usually prefer just going for the clean hit, steady shots, block strings myself. A couple of other things to note before we maybe actually go into some match footage are just a few combo reminders, I guess. So let's take a look at what I wrote down there. When to super, if it's not going to break the wall or kill, don't do it usually. So what that means is with Deus Ex Machina, if you're comboing your opponent mid-screen, I normally don't pop off super unless it's going to kill or if it's going to break the wall, because you're actually, you have a lot less frame advantage when you super rather than not. Say, for example, like when you do this, my goodness. When you do this, you do more damage, but if you throw, by the time you concentrate, you actually, your opponent has already recovered. Whereas if you just took the damage, by the time you recover, you'll have recovered from concentrate by the time your opponent gets up. So I don't normally like to spend Deus Ex Machina unless it's going to, either break the wall or kill the opponent. If you break the wall with a gun, you can concentrate or super. If you don't break the wall with gun, you can't. So yes, this is something I'm going to try to demonstrate by just setting the wall to, where is it? Oh my goodness. Okay, instant wall stick. So if you break the, the wall, for example, with like a 6S, which is something that's going to happen a lot, you can't concentrate and then super. This is not going to work. But you can do it if you gun into concentrate. I don't, like, there's a reason why it works, obviously. It's not worth going over. Just as a reminder, this doesn't work. You can, however, if you want, if you break the wall with 6S, you can reload some bullets and then go for Deus Ex Machina. You can also, like, throw Curse. It whiffed there, but if you're a bit farther out, you can throw Curse. You just can't go into concentrate Deus Ex Machina if you're using a normal to break the wall, just as a heads up. Off your 2 and 5K confirms, you can route into the wall slump routes by doing concentrate reload. So this is something that I haven't really implemented into my game plan a ton yet, but you can get a mix-up alarm's going off. You can route, so you go into a wall stick and put your opponent in like a mix-up situation where they have to guess kind of between the same options as your clean hit route. You know, you can do 2K, you can do a 5B, you can do a shimmy where you go for the throw and then backdash. You can do all that stuff. I normally don't like going for it because most of the time when I've got my opponent in that position, I just want to do what's guaranteed. And if I have 50 meter, I just want to super, get positive bonus, keep that meter going, and start zoning. Whereas if you're doing this, there is a chance your opponent is going to block or backdash or up back or whatever. And if you are not tight with your wall slump setups, they will drop very easily. So I would only recommend doing this if your opponent has like no YRC, like doesn't have a good reversal option, doesn't have 50 meter, doesn't have a DP, or like maybe even like a 5K like Souls. I would just take the wall break myself, but it can be viable if you're using it against like your Giovannas, your Milias, your Enos, people without good defensive options. Yeah, so the last thing I want to go over is just a few throw combos. The most important of which I think is if you throw and back RC, everything you do afterwards is going to be completely burst safe. So your opponent can burst the gun, but if he does, then you just pick it up with another gun. So it's very bad for them to do. So it's good to get into the habit. If you're throwing somebody, do back RC. As well, just as a heads up, if you throw somebody into the corner, holding up forward into JS is a safe jump. It will safe jump all reversals in the game. So just to keep that in mind, if you're fighting against a character with a DP, you can definitely do this. And off of your mid-screen throws, you can... What I normally just go for a lot of the time is, reload a bullet, throw a curse, and just start zoning, because this is a pretty good spacing for Happy Chaos. I don't normally like to do anything too fancy. I don't go for a lot of throw RC combos unless they're going to kill. But you can do stuff that's very similar to like your main combos. It's just it's fine if it's going to kill. I'm not a huge fan of the throw RC combos if they're not going to though. Okay, one thing, and you probably got this impression already, but Happy Chaos is not a very good character. Just gonna double check that it's still recording. He's not really a character that has good defensive options. He does not have an invincible reversal at all, besides like YRC, if you count that. So once you screw up, it's your game, like it's your opponent's game to lose. Like he is a very punishing character, so if you ever run out of resources at the inopportune time, or make an executional error, or get put on the defensive because you flubbed a zoning pattern, or what have you, you are going to be in a very compromising position. So it's totally fine. You're probably going to drop a ton of games just like I did at the start because you just don't have it, the stuff in your hands. So I would just focus on fundamentals of what we went over, and don't get too frustrated because this character is very high APM. He's harder than college, so I wouldn't sweat it too much starting out. One thing though, a defensive habit that I would definitely get into the habit of doing is because his defense is so bad, practicing being able to instant block faultless defense on wake up is something that I think is very good, especially for Happy Chaos, because his other defensive options are so limited. So what that actually looks like is, if your opponent throws you into the corner and then, meaties you with a close slash or something, what you want to do is when you're on the ground holding 2 buttons and then try to time your block in time with their meaty so that you push them farther away from you, and hopefully you can get some space, and from there maybe they whiff their next follow-up attack because they weren't expecting you to do that, and then you tag them with a 2S, and suddenly you're kind of back on the offensive. So yeah, let's just go over. think I hit everything I wanted to hit. So yeah, let's just go to the main menu and look at like 2 match videos where I kind of put these things into practice, and then we'll call the guide. So the the person that I'm fighting against is one of the better geos on NetPlay, I think, Barfy Crayon, and you know, we played a bit of a set. I did pretty good in the first couple of games, but then he kind of adapted and turned it around on me, and I wasn't able to do as well in the last couple of games. But yeah, we'll take a look at the ones where things went reasonably according to plan, just so that it's you know, decent to watch. And when there's something that I think is worth highlighting, I might just pause the match video and just kind of talk about my thought process a little bit, and then that'll be it.
Duel 1. Let's rock.
So yeah, Geo, by the way, I think is a very strong character against Happy Chaos. Her multi-hit moves beat Scapegoat a lot of the time. She has a very strong and fast dash to pull up on Happy Chaos from very like ranges that are very far out, characters that traditionally wouldn't be able to do. I threw a curse. Luckily, I didn't get punished for it. Giovanna could have definitely done like a dash close slash, but thankfully that didn't happen. And now we're starting offense. I tried to go for a shimmy, didn't work out. Setting up a Scapegoat. Unfortunately, I got tagged. And then this is one thing to highlight is bursting with Happy Chaos is one of your most important options on defense, because if you burst, your opponent is immediately sent like back to full screen, which means that they're back on, you know, in your effective zone. So it's not something to use willy-nilly. I tried to do it here just because I feel like this was a kind of a tipping point in the game. If I was going to get opened up again, they would have broke the wall with super and the game round would have been over. So let's see what happens from here. Okay, so did end up getting punished for trying to concentrate in the block string. Barfy does not super there, much to my relief. Oh yeah, and I actually, I think I kind of tunnel visioned on trying to start offense because I actually ran out of bullets there, but c'est la vie. So that was a good trade for me. You know, round start 2D is actually pretty good just because it's 10 frames, and if it trades with anything, normally it's trading in your favor. You can set up like a curse and just go into your zoning. So now it's going to be, oh, that was kind of what, you know, I can't rewind, unfortunately, but you can in the video. So I thought my opponent was going to pull up with like a dash block again after my second shot, so I did a dash 2K instead to preempt that to start offense. They burst, which is good for me. I don't know why Geo players love to do that so much, but the Dragon Ball, like in Dragon Ball, that was the defensive strategy that you used, is like micro walk out of the corner. So thankfully it worked out for me here. And now we set up that combo we talked about before. Barfy's APM is high right now. Oh my god. And now it's kind of our game to lose, right? We have positive. We can go into the concentration super when we run out of concentration like we were about to do here, so I popped it. And they, I guess, weren't expecting the fourth shot, so we got an easy victory this time. Because this does a lot.
That was annoying.
Okay, round 3.
Duel 3. Let's rock. Over here.
That's success in action. Success in action again. That button is absolutely nuts at catching jump outs. See right there, I think that was a poor choice on my part, just because my opponent did have burst, and I went for not a curse, but tried to like actually pressure the opponent on wake up, and I got gold bursted for it. So this very easily could have been turned around on me.
This is heavy. Here I go. Pretty careless.
This is going to drop, and I am going to be sad. And kind of lucked out and got just like a 2p when they tried to continue offense. So we did have a confirm, kind of dropped the super at the end, unfortunately. But yeah, for the most part, not super disappointed with that. I think I was, we'll watch one more. Maybe playing the Geo's game plan a little bit too much and need to preempt a bit more and not try to react. Which yeah, this one I do lose though, but it is close. So Barfi, I guess, recognizing that I like doing round start 2D, kind of dashes out, then dashes back in to start pressure with the 6p. 6S being a god button again. And, you know, we got a confirm, so we did throw curse ball into concentrate, starting our zoning. Barfi not wanting to deal with the 6S anymore. I don't think that was a great decision by me to go for the reload because it meant that I was still in the corner when Barfi recovered from the burst, which meant that I was getting kicked in the head. That was me trying to do IBFD. Doesn't exactly work. So after yeah, like my opponent was at a point of frame disadvantage. They tried to backdash, and the 6S actually caught, which is going to happen one more time at the end of the set, I believe. So that is something that you can use as well. If the opponent does have that tendency to just backdash when they're minus, but still safe, you can use this to call that out. Just using that guard break shot pressure we talked about. So that happened once again, right? And tried to backdash and got caught for it. I could have probably killed there. I'm not sure if I had the concentration. But yeah, I believe 8 shots still do chip, so they probably weren't ready to FD. So yeah, got a bit lucky there. I keep trying to shimmy, and maybe I should just try to throw them a bit more. So yeah, just making some bad guesses on defense. Not preempting the dash throw, or when they try to preempt it, I get hit, so it's just a numbers game. Not too worried about it. And yeah, going for concentrate against Geo is a little bit dicey, just because of how quickly she can pull up on you. Did get a nice, so from this position, you know, I kind of recognize that my opponent is closer to the corner the way that I am, rather than the way that they are. So we can go for this Iori taco kick setup we talked about. Actually manages to hit, but because I have the gun out, and this is one kind of annoying thing with the gun, is that it does make baiting bursts very difficult, because you have to put the gun away and like hard call it out. So I do end up getting bursted full screen, but like, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world with Happy Chaos. Unfortunately, I do try to go for a reload when my opponent is obviously doing Spiral Arrow, so I do have to block and take pressure. But 6H being the god, or 6S being the god button again. Choosing to pop super on concentration, just do a bit more chip. Not sure if I love that decision, honestly. Barfi doing a really good job about dancing in and out of the pressure that I'm trying to do. And that's what I was talking about, just like with Scapegoat being kind of bad against Giovanna. A lot of her moves are multi-hit, so it's a little bit dicey to go for a lot of the time, I find. I get a really lucky 6S there. And decide to pop it, okay. Yeah. And the next hit is definitely going to kill. I believe I got tagged, yeah, with a 2S trying to kind of fuzzy mash throw, and Barfy with the quick confirm into super to kill. So yeah, not too disappointed with how I play. I guess if this is indicative of anything, like Barfy's a pretty good Geo player, so like the game plan that I'm sticking to for being week 2 with Happy Chaos seems to be working reasonably okay. So hopefully it works for you and you find success with this as well. But yeah, I think we're gonna call it there, and hopefully, yeah, you find this helpful, either fighting with or against Happy Chaos. So until next time, yeah, peace out.